David lived a quiet life. His house was small, neat, and filled with silence. Every evening, after long hours at work, he returned home, put down his worn-out briefcase, and sat in the same wooden chair by the window. The chair creaked when he leaned back, and the old clock on the wall ticked loudly in the stillness. Sometimes he would turn on the radio, but most nights he let the silence surround him. It had been years since laughter or conversation filled his home. His marriage had ended long ago, and since then, he had grown used to living alone. He told himself he was fine, but the truth was that loneliness had wrapped itself around his life like a heavy blanket. That evening, the wind outside was sharp, carrying the bite of winter even though it was early autumn. David pulled his sweater tighter around his shoulders and sipped a cup of tea. He had no plans for the night, just as he had no plans for the week. Life was predictable, almost too predictable. That was when he heard the knock on his door. It wasn't the cheerful knock of a friend or a neighbor dropping by. It was soft, hesitant, as though the person outside wasn't sure if they should even be there. David rose slowly, curiosity pushing him to the door. When he opened it, he froze. Standing in the dim porch light was Elena. Everyone in the neighborhood knew her. She was the woman who used to smile warmly at people during the market days, the mother who carried groceries while holding her children's hands, the wife who used to walk beside her husband with a look of quiet pride. But tonight she looked different. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from tears, and her shoulders seemed to carry the weight of the world. She wore a coat that was too thin for the cold, and her scarf was loose as if she had rushed out of her home without care. Behind her, the street looked darker than usual, the night pressing down around them. For a moment, David didn't know what to say. He had never seen her like this, so broken, so fragile. "Elena?" he asked softly, surprised. She nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to speak. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I had nowhere else to go." Her voice was weak but carried a sadness that cut through David's chest. He stepped aside, motioning for her to come in. She hesitated for a moment, as though unsure if she should, then slowly stepped inside. The warmth of the small house greeted her, though she still shivered. David closed the door behind her, and for a moment they both stood in silence, not knowing how to begin. Finally, Elena's voice broke through the stillness. "David," she said, her hands twisting nervously, I don't know how to say this, but I must." David gestured toward the chair near the table, and she sat down slowly, her body sinking into the seat as though she hadn't rested in days. He poured her a cup of tea, pushing it gently toward her. She wrapped her hands around it, not drinking, only holding it for comfort. Her eyes lifted to his, glistening with unshed tears. "My children," she began, her voice shaking. "They cry every night. They ask for their father. They don't understand why he is gone. I try to be strong, I try to hold them, but—" Her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth to stop herself from sobbing. David felt his chest tighten. He had known her husband, a hardworking man who had always greeted people kindly. The news of his sudden death months ago had shocked the neighborhood. People had brought food and offered words of comfort. But as time passed, most returned to their own lives, leaving Elena alone with her grief. "I cannot do this alone anymore," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can work. I can feed them. But they need more than food. They need a father. Someone to guide them, someone to protect them, and She hesitated, her cheeks flushing as tears slid down her face. "I am so tired of being alone. The nights are the hardest. The bed feels cold. The silence is too loud, and I feel like I am drowning in it." David's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure if he had heard her correctly. Her words carried not only sorrow but also a plea, a request that was heavy with meaning. She looked at him with eyes that begged for understanding, for help, for something more. She lowered her head, unable to look at him anymore. "I don't want pity. I don't want charity. I want a partner, someone who can share this burden with me, someone who can be there for the children and for me. David, my children need a father, and I—" Her voice trembled, breaking completely now. "I will give you everything I have. I will warm your bed, I will share your life. But please, don't let me face this world alone." The words hung heavy in the room. David felt the air thicken around him, his breath caught in his throat. He had never expected this. Not from her, not tonight. He looked at her, her tired face, her trembling hands, her desperate eyes, and something inside him stirred. He wanted to speak, to answer, but no words came. He had lived so long in silence, convincing himself he needed no one, that his lonely life was enough. But now, in this moment, her plea cracked open the wall he had built around himself. He saw her pain, her children's pain, and he knew it was real. The clock ticked loudly in the background, filling the silence between them. Elena sat still, tears dripping onto her hands, waiting for him to say something, anything. David opened his mouth, then closed it again. His mind raced with doubts, fears, questions. Could he do this? Could he step into such a role? Could he risk his heart again? And yet, as he looked at her, he realized something else. His quiet life had not been peace, it had been emptiness. The silence he lived in was not comfort, it was loneliness. And here, right in front of him, was someone reaching out, asking him not just to help, but to live. He didn't answer that night. He simply handed her a blanket, letting her rest in the warmth of his home for a while. But in his heart, something had shifted. The knock at his door was no ordinary knock. It was the beginning of a story he had never imagined. A story that would change both their lives forever. The following days passed slowly for David. The image of Elena sitting in his chair, her eyes filled with tears and her voice trembling with pain, stayed in his mind like a shadow that would not leave. He tried to distract himself with work, with small tasks around the house, even with reading the old books he had collected years ago, but nothing helped. Her words echoed inside him again and again. My children need a father. I will warm your bed. Please don't let me face this world alone. Every evening when he sat alone at his dining table, he imagined her house just a few streets away. He thought of her trying to feed her children with whatever little she had. Thought of her sitting awake at night when the silence became unbearable. Thought of her trying to smile for her children even when her own heart was broken. The more he thought of it, the heavier his chest felt. David had known Elena before, but only from a distance. He remembered her laughter on sunny mornings when she used to walk with her husband to the market. He remembered how she often helped elderly neighbors carry heavy bags, how she always had a kind word for children playing on the street. She had been the kind of woman who made everyone around her feel noticed. Seeing her so fragile, so desperate, had shaken him more than he expected. One evening, as David was returning from work, he noticed Elena outside her home. She was trying to fix a broken wooden door that kept swinging open in the wind. Her children were playing quietly nearby, though their laughter lacked the carefree sound most children had. David hesitated for a moment, then walked over. Need some help? He asked. She looked up, surprised, her eyes softening as she saw him. It keeps breaking, she admitted, stepping aside. I try to fix it, but it won't stay. Without another word, David took off his coat, rolled up his sleeves, and examined the door. The screws were loose, the hinges old. He fetched his tools from his house and spent nearly an hour repairing it. The children watched him curiously, whispering to each other. When the door finally closed properly, Elena let out a long sigh of relief. Thank you, she said quietly. You didn't have to. David shook his head. It's nothing. You shouldn't have to struggle with this alone. The look she gave him after those words was filled with both gratitude and something unspoken, something that reminded him of her plea at his door. He quickly looked away, focusing on putting his tools back in the box. From that day, David found himself helping more often. Sometimes it was fixing a leaking tap. Sometimes it was carrying heavy bags of groceries when he saw her returning from the market. Other times it was sitting with her children, helping them with their homework. The little boy, only 8 years old, looked at David with curious eyes, as if trying to measure what kind of man he was. The girl, barely 6, was quicker to warm up, often tugging at his hand and asking him to play with her. Each time he left their house, David felt a strange warmth in his chest, one he had not felt in years. It was not just pity for a struggling widow. It was something deeper, something that touched the quiet places of his own loneliness. But alongside the warmth came hesitation. At night, when he returned to his empty home, his mind filled with doubts. Could he really step into such a role? Could he carry the weight of being a father to children who were not his own? Could he share his life again after spending so long in solitude? He had been hurt before. He had promised himself never to open his heart that way again. And yet every time he saw Elena's tired smile or her children's innocent trust, his heart pushed against the walls he had built. One evening, as the sun was setting, David joined Elena and her children for dinner. The table was simple, the meal modest, but there was a sense of warmth in the way the children chatted about their school day, and the way Elena listened carefully to each word. At one point, the little girl asked him suddenly, "Uncle David, why don't you live with us? Mama says you're very kind." The room fell silent. Elena's cheeks turned red and she looked down quickly. David felt his throat tighten, unsure how to respond. He managed a small smile and ruffled the girl's hair. "I have my own house," he said gently, but the child's innocent question stayed with him. It was a question that revealed what Elena's children longed for: a presence, a fatherly figure, someone who could fill the empty chair at their table. Later that night, after the children had gone to bed, Elena walked him to the door. She paused, her hand resting on the doorframe, her eyes searching his face. "They are growing attached to you," she whispered, "and I don't know if I should allow myself to hope." David felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to say something comforting, something clear, but all he could manage was, "You're not alone, Elena." Her eyes filled with tears and she looked away quickly. "The truth is, David, I can work myself to exhaustion. I can pay bills, cook meals, wash clothes. But at night, when the children ask for their father, when they cry and I cannot stop their tears, I feel powerless. They need more than I can give. And she took a shaky breath. "I need someone too. Someone to share the silence with. Someone who can see me, not just as a widow, but as a woman who still longs for companionship." Her words struck him deeply. It wasn't just her children who needed him. It was her. She had been strong for so long, but strength without support was breaking her. David stood in silence, his heart pounding. He could see her vulnerability, her longing, her courage in admitting what most would keep hidden. She was not asking out of weakness. She was asking because she believed in the power of family, even after loss. That night, David could not sleep. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing her voice again and again. He thought of his empty house, his cold bed, his silent evenings. And then he thought of Elena's house, the children's laughter, her tired smile, the warmth that lingered even in struggle. For the first time in years, he wondered if perhaps his life could be more than just survival. Perhaps it could be shared. The days that followed were filled with small moments that kept pulling him closer. The little boy asked him to teach him how to fix things, proudly copying David's every move. The girl often slipped her hand into his when they walked together, as if she had already chosen him as her safe place. And Elena? She looked at him sometimes with eyes full of hope, sometimes with fear, as if she didn't dare to believe he might stay. Each moment pressed against David's heart, breaking down the walls he had so carefully built. He still had doubts, still feared the weight of responsibility, but something inside him knew this was no ordinary path. This was a calling he could not ignore, and so, while he had not yet spoken his decision, while he had not yet answered her plea, the truth was slowly writing itself in his heart. His life was no longer just his own. It was entwined with hers, and with the two small children who had already begun to see him as more than just a neighbor. The days turned into weeks, and David found himself spending more and more time at Elena's house. It was no longer just occasional help with chores or small repairs. He became part of their routine, though he had not yet fully admitted it to himself. He would arrive in the mornings, helping get the children ready for school, tying shoelaces, straightening scarves, and reminding them to eat breakfast. Evenings were spent assisting with homework, reading stories, or simply sitting and listening as the children shared their day's adventures. The little boy, Andrew, had taken a special liking to David. He admired the way David could fix things, the careful way he handled tasks, and the gentle patience he showed when Andrew struggled to write a sentence or solve a math problem. The girl, Lily, was more open with her emotions. She laughed easily at David's small jokes and sometimes hid behind him when she felt shy, holding onto his arm as if he were a shield against the world. Elena watched all of this quietly. She had long ago learned to hide her emotions from the outside world, presenting a strong and capable face even when she felt weak inside. But in private, with David near, she allowed herself to breathe a little easier, to show glimpses of vulnerability she had tucked away. She noticed how naturally the children had begun to trust him, how their smiles became brighter when he was around. She noticed the way her heart stirred whenever he laughed or spoke to her with genuine concern. One evening after dinner, David helped the children brush their teeth and tucked them into bed. He watched as Lily pulled the blanket over her shoulders, Andrew clutching his pillow tightly. The room smelled faintly of lavender and night air, and the soft light from the bedside lamp cast gentle shadows on their faces. For a moment, David felt a pang of longing, an ache for a life he had never dared imagine for himself. Elena appeared at the doorway, quietly observing him. Her eyes were tired, but they shone with gratitude. "Thank you, David," she whispered. "I don't know how I could manage without you." David shook his head, unsure what to say. Words seemed inadequate for the emotions that filled the room. "It's nothing," he replied softly, though the truth was that it was far from nothing. He felt a responsibility growing inside him, a desire to protect these children and support Elena in ways he had never imagined. Elena stepped closer, and David noticed the subtle tremble in her hands. "I know I am asking a lot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know it may be sudden, and I know it is not easy to step into our lives like this. But I see how you care. I see how Andrew and Lily feel safe when you are around, and I am not strong enough to face this world alone anymore." Her words struck David deeply. He had always considered himself independent, capable of living without reliance on anyone. But hearing Elena speak so openly, seeing her vulnerability and courage, made him realize how much he had been missing in his own life. Life had been about routines and solitude, but now he saw a world filled with connection, trust, and love, if only he was willing to step into it. The next day, David returned to her house to help with the children's morning routine. The little ones were cheerful and playful, running around the room, laughing and sometimes stumbling over their words or their shoes. David found himself smiling without effort, enjoying their presence in a way he had not realized he missed. Elena prepared breakfast, and they shared small talk, laughter, and quiet moments of understanding. It was ordinary life in some ways, yet extraordinary in the way it filled the emptiness he had grown used to. As the day progressed, David noticed the challenges Elena faced daily. Laundry needed to be done, groceries needed to be carried, bills needed attention, and yet she managed it all with determination. But he also noticed the strain in her eyes, the fatigue that sometimes made her sit down mid-task, and the subtle worry lines that had deepened since her husband's passing. He wanted to ease her burden, to take on some of the weight she bore so gracefully yet painfully. One evening, David stayed late to help the children with a school project. They were building a small model of a park, cutting tiny trees from green paper, gluing benches, and painting pathways. Andrew looked up at David with wide eyes. "Do you think Daddy would have liked this?" he asked quietly. David's heart tightened. He wanted to tell the boy that he could imagine it, that he could fill the role of guidance and comfort for him, but he wasn't sure how to express it without overstepping. He simply nodded, smiling gently. "I think he would have loved it, Andrew, and he would be proud of how hard you're working." Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Uncle David, can you help me with this tree?" she asked. Her eyes were filled with trust, and she leaned close so he could help position the tiny paper leaves. The sight of the children so open, so reliant on him for guidance and support, touched something deep within David. He realized that he was already beginning to care for them in a way that went beyond casual kindness. He was becoming part of their lives, part of their daily rhythm, and part of their hearts. Later that night, as he walked home, David thought about Elena's plea again. "I will warm your bed. My children need a father." The words had haunted him since that night, and now he understood their meaning more fully. It wasn't just about physical presence or companionship. It was about being a protector, a guide, someone to create a safe and loving home for children who had lost so much. It was about giving strength to a woman who had been carrying a heavy burden alone. David's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a child's laughter echoing faintly from Elena's home. It was Andrew, chasing Lily around the small living room, both of them squealing with delight. The sound warmed David's heart, a reminder of what life could be when shared. He realized that he wanted to be part of that joy, part of that family. But the thought also brought fear. Could he commit to this fully? Could he embrace the responsibilities and challenges that came with being a father figure to children who were not his own? The next morning, David returned with breakfast for the children and helped them get ready for school. He found himself slipping naturally into routines he had never imagined for himself. He reminded Andrew to brush his teeth, helped Lily tie her shoelaces, and even packed a small snack for both of them. Elena watched him, a mixture of relief and admiration in her eyes. She knew she could not continue like this forever. The children needed consistency, warmth, and care, and she had begun to hope that David could provide that. As the week continued, David noticed small changes in the household. The children were happier, calmer, and more confident. Andrew began asking questions about fixing things around the house, eager to learn from David. Lily, who had once been shy and reserved, started laughing more openly, holding his hand when she felt shy, and even climbing into his lap for comfort during bedtime stories. Elena's face also softened, the tension lines from grief easing slightly as she saw the positive influence David was having on her children. One evening, after tucking the children into bed, David and Elena stayed behind in the living room. The house was quiet, the children asleep, and for a moment there was a rare sense of peace. Elena sat across from him, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes filled with something he could not name: hope, gratitude, and something deeper that made his heart stir. "You've done more than I could ever ask for," she whispered. "You've been here when I couldn't manage, when I was too tired, too overwhelmed. You've been our anchor." David shook his head, feeling both the weight and warmth of her words. I didn't realize how much I wanted this too," he admitted quietly. "I didn't realize how empty my life had been until I saw yours. Until I saw them." Elena looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said softly. I needed you to see what it's like. To see how much they need someone. How much I need someone. That's all." David nodded, his mind racing with thoughts and emotions he could not easily untangle. He realized that his life was changing whether he chose it or not. The connection he felt with Elena and her children was real, deep and undeniable. He could not turn away from it, though he still feared the responsibilities ahead. That night, David lay in his own bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of the laughter of Andrew and Lily, of Elena's weary but hopeful face, of the moments he had shared with them over the past week. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: the stirring of hope, the whisper of possibility, and the gentle pull of a life that could be richer, fuller, and warmer than the silence he had grown used to. Days turned into weeks, and David could no longer ignore the growing bond he felt with Elena and her children. Every visit, every shared meal, every laugh and tear had slowly woven him into the fabric of their lives. He had never imagined this kind of closeness, nor the way it could awaken emotions he thought he had long buried. The walls he had built around his heart over the years were slowly crumbling, and with each passing day, he realized how lonely his life had truly been. One chilly evening, David returned from work to find the children sitting on the living room floor drawing pictures. Andrew had drawn a house with a garden. Lily had drawn herself and her brother holding hands with someone tall, someone clearly meant to be David. The drawings were simple, but the intention was clear. They wanted him to see that they already considered him part of their world. He knelt beside them, examining each picture with gentle attention, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Elena watched quietly from the kitchen doorway, her eyes soft but guarded. She smiled faintly when she saw him smile, and the sight of her allowed David to feel a tenderness he had not experienced in years. Yet he also felt fear. He had lived alone for so long, keeping control of his life, avoiding vulnerability. Now he stood at a crossroads. He could step fully into this new life with its joys and challenges, or retreat to the comfort of solitude. After the children were tucked into bed, David and Elena sat together in the quiet living room. The soft glow of the lamp illuminated their faces. Elena finally spoke, her voice low and tentative. "David, I know this is not easy for you. I know I am asking a lot. I am asking you to step into our lives, to care for us in ways you have never imagined. But I see how you care. I see how much they already trust you, and I—" She paused, searching for the right words. "I am afraid. Afraid to hope, afraid to ask for too much. But I can't keep pretending we can do this alone." David took a deep breath. He wanted to tell her everything he felt. The warmth, the connection, the sense of purpose that had grown inside him since meeting them. But words felt insufficient, almost fragile. Instead, he reached out and gently took her hand in his. "Elena, I don't know what the future holds," he said softly. "I don't know if I am ready for everything this means. But I do know this. I don't want to turn away from you or from them. I don't want to leave this warmth behind. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She looked down, then back at him as if searching for certainty. You mean that? She whispered. David nodded. I do. I've been alone for too long. I thought solitude was enough, but now I realize that what I've been missing is here in front of me. You and the children. You've already become a part of me whether I admit it or not. For a long moment, they sat together in silence. The quiet was comforting, not lonely. David could feel Elena's heartbeat close to his, steady and fragile at the same time. He realized that this was more than companionship. It was partnership. It was trust. It was family. And in that realization he found both courage and fear. Courage to embrace it, fear of failing them. The next few days tested both David and Elena. Small challenges arose. The children had school projects, bills needed attention, and unexpected chores piled up. Yet in every moment David found himself stepping forward naturally. He helped Andrew assemble a science project that involved tiny batteries and wires, showing him patience and precision. He helped Lily with a painting that required careful brushstrokes, encouraging her to take her time and be proud of her work. And through it all, Elena observed quietly, seeing a man she could trust, someone who cared not only for her children but for her as well. One evening, a minor crisis struck. The power went out while the children were in the middle of dinner. Candles were quickly lit, but the children became frightened by the darkness and the strange sounds of the night. Andrew clutched David's hand, trembling, while Lily hid behind Elena. David calmly guided them, holding their hands, telling small stories to distract them from the fear. He even helped Elena prepare a quick dinner on the small stove that still functioned, ensuring the children ate and felt safe. When the lights finally returned, the children were calmer, smiling despite the earlier panic. Elena looked at David with gratitude and awe. You were amazing," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." David shrugged lightly, though inside he felt proud and warm. "We all did it together," he replied, smiling at the children. Over the following days, David began to imagine a life fully intertwined with Elena and the children. He pictured mornings filled with laughter, evenings of shared meals and stories, quiet nights where he could sit with Elena after the children slept, talking about everything and nothing. He realized that his fear of commitment was strong, but the potential for love, connection, and purpose outweighed it. One particularly quiet evening after the children were asleep, David and Elena sat on the small porch outside her house. The night was calm, the stars twinkling softly above. Elena leaned slightly toward him, and David felt a comforting warmth as their shoulders touched. "I've been afraid," she confessed. "Afraid that no one could ever step into this role. Afraid that I would have to face the rest of my life alone. But now, seeing you here, seeing how you care, I feel hope for the first time in a long while." David looked at her, his own emotions stirring. "I was afraid too," he admitted. "Afraid of failing you and the children. Afraid of opening my heart again. But now that I can't imagine turning away, I want to try. I want to be part of this life if you'll let me." Elena's eyes softened and a small smile appeared on her lips. "Then we will try together," she said gently. "You don't have to do everything at once. We'll take it one day at a time. But just having you here, it makes everything feel possible." That night, David walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights, feeling a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and anticipation. For the first time in years, he felt alive in a way that solitude had never allowed. He understood that the path ahead would not be easy. Being part of a family, helping Elena raise her children, balancing work, life, and responsibilities, it would be challenging. But he also knew that the reward was far greater than the comfort of an empty, predictable life. As he lay in his bed, he reflected on everything that had happened. He thought of the children's laughter, their small victories, and their innocent trust. He thought of Elena's courage and vulnerability, her willingness to reach out despite fear. And he thought of himself, standing at the edge of a decision that could change all their lives. For the first time in years, he welcomed the uncertainty. For the first time, he felt ready to embrace life, with all its risks and rewards. The following morning, David returned to Elena's house with renewed determination. He helped the children get ready, assisted with breakfast, and even managed to fix a leaky faucet that had been troubling Elena for weeks. Throughout the day, Small moments of joy reminded him why he had chosen to step closer, why he was slowly letting himself care so deeply. Every hug from the children, every soft smile from Elena, every quiet thank you whispered in passing, became a building block of the life they could create together. By evening, David realized something remarkable. He was no longer a visitor in their lives. He was part of it. He was becoming someone the children relied on, someone Elena could trust, someone who could bring warmth and stability into a home that had known so much loss. And in that realization, fear began to give way to hope. He understood that love and responsibility were not burdens. They were chances to heal, to grow, and to belong. For the first time since Elena's plea at his door, David felt certain. He could not turn back. He would embrace the challenge, embrace the family, and embrace the possibility of a life filled with laughter, warmth, and connection. The walls of solitude that had once surrounded him were gone, replaced by something stronger and far more beautiful. A heart ready to love, and a home ready to be filled with life. David woke up that morning with a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of loneliness lifting from his shoulders, replaced by something heavier, but infinitely warmer, a sense of belonging, of responsibility, and of possibility. The events of the past weeks had changed him in ways he had never imagined. Elena's plea at his door, the children's laughter, their trust in him, it had all led him to a decision he could no longer avoid. Today he would step fully into their lives, not as a visitor or helper, but as someone they could count on every single day. When he arrived at Elena's house, the children were already awake, preparing for school. Andrew was attempting to tie his own shoelaces, but struggling, while Lily was balancing a breakfast plate in her small hands. David knelt beside Andrew, guiding his fingers patiently through the loops of the laces. The boy's face lit up when he finally got it right, and he hugged David tightly, whispering, "Thanks, Uncle David." Lily, seeing her brother's success, ran to David and hugged his legs. "You're the best, Uncle David," she said, smiling through her morning hair. David laughed softly, feeling a warmth in his chest that had been absent for too long. He realized then that these simple moments, the small victories, the shared smiles, were the heart of family life. They were more precious than he had ever imagined. Elena entered the room carrying a tray with hot milk and toast for the children. She paused when she saw David helping Andrew and smiled, though there was a hint of nervousness in her expression. She had watched him grow closer to her children over the past weeks, and she had begun to hope that he would choose to stay, that he would embrace them fully. But hope had to be tempered with reality. She did not want to ask too much, to push too hard and risk losing him. David noticed her glance and met her eyes. He felt a surge of courage and decided that the time for hesitation had passed. He took a deep breath and spoke gently but firmly. "Elena, I have been thinking a lot about all of this, about you, the children, and what I want for myself. And I realize that I don't want to walk away. I want to be part of your lives every day in every way I can. I want to help raise Andrew and Lily, to share responsibilities, to share laughter, and even the challenges." Elena's eyes widened, and for a moment, she could hardly believe what she was hearing. Relief, gratitude, and joy welled up inside her, threatening to spill over. "David, are you sure?" she asked softly. He nodded, a quiet confidence in his voice. "I am sure. I don't know what the future will bring, and I know there will be hard days. But I want to face them with you. We can do this together." The children, overhearing this, erupted into happy chatter. Lily jumped up and hugged David, spinning around while Andrew beamed and high-fived him. For David, it was a moment of pure joy, a confirmation that he had made the right choice. He felt a connection to these children that was deeper than he had ever experienced with anyone else. And he understood that love was not something you could plan for or control. It was something you allowed yourself to feel. The days that followed were filled with small but meaningful adjustments. David helped with morning routines, school preparations, homework, and bedtime stories. He began preparing simple meals for them and even learned the children's favorite dishes. Elena, relieved and grateful, could finally catch her breath. She realized she did not have to carry the weight of everything alone anymore. She saw that David was not just helping. He was becoming an integral part of their lives, someone they could rely on without question. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep, David and Elena sat together on the small porch. The air was cool and the stars shone brightly above them. There was a calmness in the night, a sense of peace that David had never felt in years. He took Elena's hand in his and spoke softly. "I know this is not just about me helping out. It's about building a family, about trust, love, and being there for each other. And I want that. I want us." Elena squeezed his hand gently, tears forming in her eyes. "I have dreamed of this for so long," she whispered. "I have dreamed of someone who could care for us, who could love my children as much as I do. And now, it feels real." The next morning, David and Elena began making plans for the household. They organized chores, set schedules for the children, and even planned small activities for the weekend. Andrew and Lily were thrilled, excited by the sense of stability and fun that David brought into their lives. David found that he was not just helping, they were helping him too. He learned patience, joy in small victories, and the strength that came from being needed and trusted. One day, while taking the children to the park, David noticed how naturally they gravitated toward him. Andrew wanted him to teach him to ride his bicycle without training wheels, and Lily wanted to hold his hand while crossing the street. Elena walked beside them, smiling, feeling a sense of security she had not known in months. Watching the children laugh and play, seeing their trust in him, David understood that he had stepped into a life that was messy, beautiful, and full of meaning. Evenings were now a time of warmth and connection rather than solitude. After the children were tucked in, David and Elena would sit together, talking about their days, sharing dreams, and supporting each other through challenges. The simple act of being together, of leaning on one another, created a bond that was strong and resilient. David realized that Elena's plea at his door, the request to be a father figure and partner, was not just about filling a void. It was about creating a life together, about building love and stability where there had been loss. Weeks passed, and the household became a rhythm of love, laughter, and care. The children thrived, their happiness reflected in their schoolwork, their play, and their growing confidence. Elena, relieved and grateful, found moments to rest, to smile, and to nurture her own heart alongside her children's. David felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. He realized that true strength was not in isolation but in connection, not in solitude but in caring for others, and not in avoidance but in courageously stepping into responsibility. One quiet night, David sat by the children's bedroom door, listening to their gentle breathing. He reflected on how far he had come, from a man who feared closeness, who valued solitude above all, to someone who had opened his heart and found joy in family. He realized that love was not about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about showing up, being consistent, and choosing each day to care. Elena approached quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the help, but for choosing us, for choosing this life with us." David smiled softly, feeling the weight of her words. "No, thank you," he replied, "for trusting me, for letting me in, for showing me that life can be richer when shared." In the weeks and months that followed, their lives continued to grow together. David became a father figure to Andrew and Lily, a partner to Elena, and a part of a family that had once seemed impossible. The nights were no longer cold and silent. They were filled with warmth, laughter, and the small, precious moments that make life meaningful. The bed that David once thought of as a place of solitude became a symbol of love and connection, shared with someone who had needed him as much as he had needed them. Through it all, David understood that life's greatest gifts often come unexpectedly, in moments that challenge us to step beyond fear and embrace love. Elena's plea at his door had been the beginning of something extraordinary, a journey of healing, trust, and belonging. And in choosing to answer that plea, David discovered a life fuller and richer than he had ever imagined, a life filled with family, love, and warmth that would endure for years to come. By the end of that first year together, the house was no longer just a structure of walls and furniture. It was alive with memories, laughter, and a sense of stability that had been absent for too long. David, Elena, Andrew, and Lily had built a life together, proving that family could be formed in unexpected ways, that love could heal old wounds, and that courage sometimes means opening your heart fully, even when it feels scary. And in that truth, They all found a home, not just a physical space, but a place of belonging, warmth, and unbreakable connection.